I set the little camera on a stack of old cookbooks and tap the red circle. The kitchen hums the way it always has. Refrigerator buzzing, clock ticking, kettle breathing out a thin ribbon of steam. I'm 72, and this is the one story I never wanted to tell. My hands shake anyway, so I hold the mug with both and keep my voice steady. I won't use real names, I say. And some faces will be blurred. But the truth is the truth. The tea fogs my glasses. Through it, I can almost see a window from long ago. A bus window, smeared with fingerprints and sunset dust. 1970. Something skimming past like a film reel. Fields turning to plains, plains to hard blue mountains. I was 19, wearing a dress that didn't feel like mine, carrying a letter I was told not to open. I remember thinking, if I close my eyes long enough, maybe home will catch up to me. It never did. Back in the present, I slide 3 things across the table, one by one, so the lens can see them. First, a small photograph, corners rounded with age. The faces, mine, 2 other girls, and a woman in black, are softened with a blur I added yesterday on my granddaughter's phone. It isn't to hide, it's to keep us from being used again. Second, a folded slip with a brittle edge, the word discharge, a date, a stamp. Paper that wanted to pretend mercy had happened. Third, a clipped article from a local paper, the headline careful as a lawyer. Former residents allege misconduct at institution. Most of the lines are redacted with thick marker. Protection, they called it. It felt like erasure. I tell the camera how ordinary the morning was before everything changed. Eggs in a pan, toast under the broiler. My father's voice too flat to be safe. A priest in the next room. A suitcase that couldn't hold the person I used to be. I tell it how the bus smelled like coffee and cigarettes and something metal, and how the driver didn't look at me twice. No one did. A girl traveling alone wasn't a miracle. It was a secret people respected as long as they didn't have to know it. The kettle rattles against the burner, a small, nervous sound. I lower the flame and look straight into the glass eye watching me. There's one thing you need to understand before I go on, I say. At that place, the rules were simple. Wake before the sun. Work until your hands forgot softness. Pray until your knees forgot feeling. And never ask why. Mercy was in the name. It wasn't in the walls. I take a sip. Let the silence sit. On Thursdays, I say softly. The bell rang twice. The cup stops halfway to the saucer. Even now, the memory pulls the air out of the room. 2 bright strikes, too close together, cutting the day into a before and an after. After the second ring, a girl would be missing at dinner. No questions, no notes. Just a space where a face should be. I gather the photo, the slip, the article, stacking them like cards I'm finally willing to show. If you're hearing this, I tell the camera, it means I finally found the courage. Sundays had a rhythm where I grew up. You ironed on Saturday night, set shoes in a row by the door, and woke to the smell of coffee and floor wax. We were the kind of family that arrived 5 minutes early and sat 3 pews from the front, because that's where my mother liked the light through the stained glass. Church, school, chores, repeat. It wasn't fancy, but it was solid, like the oak table my father refinished every winter until you could see your face in it. I was the oldest of 5. That meant braiding hair, checking homework, slicing apples so no one fought over the bigger half. On weekdays, I walked my sisters to class and took my brothers the long way home past the creek because the cattails were thick in spring, and I liked the way they rattled in the wind. Good girl, people said, and I carried those words like a report card you don't want to smudge. Straight A's, on time, helpful, quiet. The town measured you by how you filled your days. Mine were full. Before school, dishes, lunches, beds pulled tight enough to bounce a coin, as my father liked to say. After school, choir practice, bake sale sign-ups, evenings helping Mama fold laundry still warm from the line. On Fridays, I wiped the glass of the church notice board and changed the paper letters. Choir rehearsal 6 p.m. Youth study 7:15. If the wind picked up, the letters clacked like teeth. I thought my path was set. Graduate, teach 2nd grade, marry a decent man who didn't drink too much, raise children who knew they were loved. I had a little notebook with classroom ideas. How to label the reading corner, a game for practicing spelling with bottle caps. At night, when the house finally went quiet, I'd open the window a crack and plan lessons to the sound of crickets and freight trains. But private dreams have a way of bumping against the edges others draw for you. Good girls don't linger, my aunt would say if I stayed too long at a friend's porch. Good girls don't call boys, my mother would add, not unkindly, more like a rule about leaving the porch light on. And the big one, the one that lived under everything. Good girls don't bring shame. I keep a small stack of proof for the camera. Things an old woman holds on to because paper remembers what people don't. I slide the yearbook page into the frame. Faces in tidy rows, my hair scraped back. A caption under the choir photo that reads, Spring Concert, Hymns of Hope. There's a circle in pencil around my name and a teacher's note on the margin. A steady voice. Reliable. Reliable was another way of saying you won't make trouble. Next, the choir schedule. Mimeographed purple ink that still smells faintly sweet if you press your nose to it. Rehearsal, Tues, Thurs, 5:30, 6:30. Sunday, warm-up, 8:15. I remember the way our voices braided in that cold loft, how the altos carried the floor while the sopranos traced the ceiling. Music made me bigger than my body for a while. Then I climbed down and went back to being useful. Last, my father's pay stub, numbers neat as fence posts, hours stacked like cordwood, deductions biting little teeth out of the total. He worked hard, and hard work made him strict. He wasn't cruel. He just believed life was a narrow bridge and one wrong step meant falling. At school, the hallway smelled like floor polish and chalk. I loved it there. The librarian learned my name. Mrs. Davenport let me grade spelling quizzes for fun. Sometimes she'd loan me the teacher's edition, answers printed in red. I'd trace the key lightly with my finger and imagine a life where I had the answers, where nothing important got erased. But home trained me to be small. Don't laugh too loud. Don't ask twice. Smile, say thank you, look away. I could hold two things at once, a head full of plans and a spine taught to fold. That's how girls like me got to 19 with their report cards perfect and their voices packed into the tiniest drawers. The town watched. Not in a mean way, mostly. People waved. They noticed if your hem was too short or your hair too loose, and they mentioned it like a weather report. Clouds coming in. Mrs. Ramsey from 2 doors down could tell you who skipped Wednesday study and who stayed late after choir with the lights off in the hall. Adults called it concern. To kids, it felt like the world breathing down your neck. On St. Patrick's Week, the church hall took on a different heat. Green paper chains, tables crowded with potluck dishes that tasted like every auntie in town, a record player scratching a slow waltz. I wasn't there to be seen. I was there to collect serving spoons and stack paper plates and make sure the coffee urn didn't run dry. But music finds you. It threads through noise and says stand up. When someone asked me to dance, polite hand at my waist, proper distance, the way Sister had taught us, I said yes because it was only 3 minutes, and it felt nice to glide. The next morning, the kitchen looked the same. Eggs in the pan, toast under the broiler, my brothers arguing about the last orange. My father's chair scraped back from the table, the sound like a saw biting into green wood. A priest sat in the parlor. My mother's eyes were swollen and steady. A white envelope lay on the sideboard like a trapped bird. I didn't know it then, but everything I was, good girl, steady voice, reliable, was about to be used as a lever to pry me out of my own life. One harmless dance, they said. One letter I wasn't allowed to open. One decision I didn't get to make. The bell in our church tower rang once that morning, just the hour. Weeks later, somewhere else, I would learn what it meant when a bell rang twice. But first came the envelope, the bus, and the place that wore mercy like a mask. Daddy didn't raise his voice. That would have been easier. He stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the parlor, hat still on his head, eyes fixed somewhere over my shoulder, and said it like he was reading off the back of a seed packet. Father has arranged a place. The sisters take girls who need correction. You'll leave Friday. The plate I was drying slipped from my hands, hit the tile, and broke into 3 clean pieces. The sound was bright and final, like a cymbal in a quiet song. No one moved to pick it up. The kettle hissed. My youngest brother's fork scraped his plate once and went still. Somewhere outside a neighbor's dog barked, cheerful and wrong. I looked to Mama because all my life she had been the soft landing. She had lain the dress out each Easter, pressed the hem of my choir robe, taught me to bell the biscuits so they rose pretty. But that morning her hands were folded so tight the knuckles went white, and her mouth was a thin line like a seam she refused to open. She didn't look at me. She stared at the table as if the wood could tell her how to be a mother and a believer at the same time. The priest sat in our front room, a dark figure on the good sofa. He didn't bother to stand. I could see him through the doorway, his collar neat, his hands resting on his knees like he was in charge of his own patients. I thought about carrying him a cup of coffee out of habit, then didn't. My heart felt like it had slipped its bridle. I didn't do anything, I said, and my voice sounded childish to my own ears, high and thin. It was a dance. Daddy blinked once. It was shame, he said, and shame spreads. Then softer, like he was explaining the weather. This will put you right. The sisters will teach you discipline. You'll come back better. Better than what? I wanted to ask. Better than the girl who stacked hymnals and walked her sisters to school and never stepped off the sidewalk. I looked to Mama again, begging without words. Her eyes were red from a night I hadn't known about. She lifted one hand, almost as if to reach for me, then set it back down. The movement was so small it might have been a tremor. In the parlor, a white envelope lay on the sideboard. Thick paper, the flap sealed. For Mother Superior written in the priest's tidy hand. I didn't know letters could hold decisions bigger than the person carrying them. I didn't know paper could feel like a lock. He cleared his throat. The Sisters of... He named a place I'd never been, far enough that the map in my head went blank. They do good work. There are rules, but rules are medicine. You'll hand this to the Mother Superior when you arrive. He tapped the envelope. You must not read it. I stepped backward until my calves found the chair and sat, because standing seemed like something that could fail me next. In the kitchen, the shards of the plate caught the light. I wanted to kneel and gather them, but couldn't trust my hands. Friday came like a deadline you don't remember setting. Mama folded clothes into a small suitcase, the brown one with the scuffed corner, and laid a rosary on top as if beads could weigh down a life. She tucked my hairbrush in the side pocket and paused, fingers caught in the bristles. Take the blue sweater, she said, voice steady out of stubbornness. Desert nights get cold. It was the first thing she'd said to me about the leaving that wasn't instruction. I kept my own proofs, little things that couldn't argue but still told the truth. The bus ticket stub the clerk tore and slid under the glass. Springfield, Santa Fe, Friday, 6:15 a.m., made a soft click on the counter that I felt in my teeth. The sealed letter I wasn't allowed to open went into my coat pocket, heavy as a stone, beating time with my pulse each step to the station. The house smelled like coffee and bleach the way it always did on chore mornings. My brothers pretended to eat. My sisters sat in their nightgowns on the stairs, toes tucked under, eyes too big. Daddy lifted the suitcase and carried it to the car like he was hauling something righteous. At the door, Mama straightened my collar, then smoothed the same place again and again. pressing down a wrinkle that wasn't there. When she finally spoke, her words were careful, so they wouldn't break. "Write when you can," she said. "Be obedient." Her thumb swept my cheek. "Come back to us right." At the station, the bench was cold through my skirt. The bus idled, coughing diesel breath. Travelers stood with their own worries in paper bags and canvas sacks. No one looked like they were being mended. Daddy set the suitcase at my feet, handed me the envelope, and took off his hat. For a second, I thought he might touch my shoulder. He didn't. "Do what you're told," he said. "You'll be grateful later." I climbed the steps and handed the driver my ticket. He tore the stub with a practiced motion, handed me the other half without a glance. I found a window seat and put the suitcase on the rack above, surprised again at how a life could weigh so little and so much at the same time. When the bus pulled out, the town slid by in small pieces. The hardware store's hand-painted sign, the schoolyard swing set, the church steeple pricking the morning. I pressed my forehead to the glass and watched the familiar widen into fields, then plains, then the far blue seam of mountains I'd only ever traced with a finger on a map. I kept the envelope in my lap like a sleeping bird. I thought if I warmed it with my hands, the seal might soften and the words inside might change. They didn't. Somewhere a bell tolled for the hour. Later, in a place that borrowed the word for its name, I would learn what it meant when the bell rang twice. Mercy was in the name. It wasn't in the walls. The station in Santa Fe smelled like dust and coffee gone bitter on a hot plate. A woman in black waited near the door with her hands tucked into wide sleeves, chin lifted as if measuring the room and finding it short. She didn't hold a sign with my name. She didn't need one. She looked at me the way a tailor looks at fabric, how much to cut, how much to throw away. "You'll address me as Sister Agnes," she said once we were in the car, an old station wagon that rattled at stoplights. "Questions are unnecessary. You will learn the rule of silence." Her voice carried a clipped northern edge, precise enough to trim hair. The city thinned behind us. Adobe walls gave way to scrub and sky. Mountains sat on the horizon like folded knees. I kept my hands folded too, the sealed letter heavy in my pocket. The road turned to a long ribbon of washboard. When we reached the gates, I understood why the map had felt blank. The convent didn't share a neighborhood or a street. It had claimed a piece of nowhere and wrapped it tight. Whitewashed walls rose higher than a girl could climb, their tops lined with old shards embedded in mortar like frozen teeth. A bell tower needled the sky from the center, the cross at its peak small as a pin from where I stood. If the wind had a sound here, it got swallowed. Sister Agnes parked beside a low wooden door cut into the wall. "You'll remove your coat," she said. "There is no need for outside garments." Inside, the temperature dropped. Cool stone, beeswax, boiled vegetables. The entrance hall was narrow and long, hung with paintings of saints caught mid-suffering. Someone had scrubbed the floor so often the stone had a shallow valley where feet had passed for years. Everything echoed. Our steps, the latch, my breath. We stopped at an office with a heavy desk and a crucifix that seemed to watch as well as hang. The woman behind the desk looked carved from the same wood, straight-backed, thin-lipped, pale eyes that didn't blink more than necessary. "Mother Superior," Sister Agnes said, and left me standing with my suitcase handle pinched between two fingers. "Name," the woman said. I gave it. She wrote it in a ledger with a pen that scratched like an insect. "You understand why you are here." I began. "We do not speak of the past," she said, not raising her voice. "What is done. Here you will learn obedience, prayer, and useful work. You will not speak except during instruction or confession. You will write 1 letter home per month, subject to my review. You will not possess unapproved items." I slid the sealed envelope from my pocket. She took it without looking at me, broke the seal as if it were a routine fly to swat, and read. The only change in her face was a small, approving nod at something written there. She folded the paper, placed it in a drawer, and turned the ledger toward me. Columns labeled name, date, items confiscated. She read aloud while Sister Agnes unlatched my suitcase. Brush, rosary, approved. Diary, retained. Photographs, retained pending review. Cosmetics, none. Her pen scratched entries into the page. Diary, blue cloth. Photographs, 3. Ticket stub. I watched my life become a list. Tomorrow before chapel, Mother Superior said matter-of-factly, your hair will be cut. Long hair invites vanity. The body is a vessel, not a display. The way she said before chapel suggested the hour mattered like a vow. Sister Agnes closed the suitcase and carried it away. You will be issued clothing appropriate to your station, she said over her shoulder. Come. We stopped at a bulletin board on the corridor wall. A sheet of paper, edges curling, listed the house rhythm in neat black type. Daily schedule. 5 p.m. is a morning prayer. 5 p.m. breakfast, silence. 5:30, 12 hours work assignments. 12:15, midday prayer and meal, silence. 1:05, 1, instruction to work. 5:30, evening prayer and meal, silence. 7, 8:30, devotion or tasks. 9 lights out. A second page listed duties with columns of names I didn't know yet. Laundry, kitchen, garden, sewing. Beside them, a small card pinned at an angle. Silence is mercy for the soul. I thought of how mercy should feel. Warm, loosening, and wondered why it sounded like a lock. The dormitory was a long room with 2 rows of narrow beds made so tight the sheets could have stood on their own. At the foot of each, a trunk. Above each, nothing, no photos, no keepsakes, not even a hook. A tall window at one end let in a square of evening that didn't quite reach the floor. You will sleep here, Sister Agnes said, pointing to the bed closest to the door. She opened the trunk. Inside, 2 gray work dresses, a coarser garment for prayer, underthings folded to perfect rectangles. Keep order. The soul mirrors the drawer. Her mouth tightened at her own proverb, as if it tasted too sweet to enjoy. While she spoke, another sister appeared in the doorway and set a folded stack on the trunk. Towels, a bar of soap that smelled faintly medicinal, a comb. She was younger than the others, soft around the eyes in a way that made me ache. Sister Margaret, Sister Agnes said, almost as a warning. The younger sister gave me the smallest nod, a human gesture in a place where most movements look like duties. Welcome, Sister Margaret said, voice low. The word sounded like it was trying to grow in rocky soil. Supper is in 10 minutes. Her glance flicked to my hair, then away, apology passing over her features like a shadow from a cloud. At supper we sat in rows, hands in laps until a bell. A novice read aloud from a book about saints who endured pain with grace. The food was plain and hot and not enough. I lifted the spoon to my mouth and thought about how hunger wears different uniforms. Around me, girls stared at their bowls and pretended the words in the air were food. No one spoke. The quiet wasn't peace. It was a wait. After, Sister Agnes walked me through corridors that braided and turned until I'd lost my sense of direction. Stone steps, a door that stayed locked, a courtyard where the air smelled of dry herbs, the chapel where candles stood like little soldiers, sentries for a god I couldn't find in this geometry. In a small washroom, I cupped water in my hands and watched it drip from my fingers. The mirror above the sink had been polished so fiercely the glass wavered. I raised my eyes and saw a girl made smaller by a room, travel-worn, hair loose from pins, mouth pressed thin to keep from shaking. A stranger almost. I touched the edge of the glass as if I could push through. On the way back to the dormitory, we passed the bulletin board again. My name had been added to the laundry column in a neat, unfamiliar hand. Rise 4:30 waited at the top of the page like a command I hadn't consented to. At the dormitory door, Sister Agnes paused. Lights out at 9. Morning prayer at 4:30. Tomorrow. Her eyes settled on my hair. Before chapel. She left me with the towel and the trunk and the square of fading light. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened as the building settled. Pipes ticking, a far-off clapper knocking the bell once like a throat clearing. I thought of the walls outside, how they held the sky out of reach. I looked again into the washroom mirror before the lights went. The face looking back did not recognize the life that belonged to it yet. Unfamiliar cheekbones, a mouth learning new angles of silence. I pressed 2 fingers to the glass. Cool. Hard. Not giving. Tomorrow they would cut my hair. Tonight I learned what it felt like to disappear by inches. The days flattened into a pattern you could count on your knuckles. Up before the sky remembered color. Knees to stone until they went from pins and needles to a slow humming ache. Breakfast that was hot and thin. Oatmeal like wall paste. Bread that cracked instead of tore. Work until the bell. Instruction. More work. Silence stitched between everything like thread you couldn't break. Laundry became my world. The room lived below ground, a damp lung under the convent. Copper tubs. Steam that curled the hair at the nape of your neck. Wooden paddles that raised blisters in the same crescent on every girl's palm. We fed sheets into the mangle, turned the handles until the rollers squealed, stacked the limp cloth in piles tall as small children. After a week, my hands looked older than my face, red, cracked at the knuckles, thumbs bandaged with scraps cut from ruined rags. On the wall beside the door hung a duty chart, names hand-printed in black pencil under neat columns. Laundry, kitchen, garden, sewing, floors. A sister would slide little tin markers down the rows each Sunday night. I learned the rhythm of its clicks the way other girls learn birdsong. Thompson, laundry, a.m. Sewing, p.m. Once, for 2 days, they moved me to kitchen. Then the tin slid back. Laundry was where they kept the quiet ones. We lined up for meals with ration cards pinned inside our sleeves, tiny boxes to be punched with a pin so the hole was smaller than hunger. 1 ladle, 1 slice, no seconds. If you traded in looks and favors, not food. On bath day, 6 of us shared a tub and a single sliver of brown soap. First girl got warmth, last girl got honesty. We toweled off fast because modesty mattered more than comfort, even among women. At chapel, a laminated seating roster told us where to place our bodies as if God marked attendance by row and column. Names in small print. A tick mark for absences. The air smelled of beeswax and old books. I watched the light creep along the floor, stone by stone, and taught myself not to count how long it took to cross. The first red flag in laundry wasn't a flag. It was a sheet the color of surrender, folded wrong. I shook it out and saw what the steam tried to hide. Brown, rusted blooms in places they didn't belong, and other stains that weren't dirt. I went still. Across from me, a girl named Evelyn, tall, freckled, elbows like hinges, took 1 step and covered my hands with her own, folding the sheet back in on itself. "Special wash," she mouthed, eyes lifting toward the small locked bin by the wall. "What?" I started, because a question is a reflex if you've lived with fairness. Evelyn's pupils snapped to mine. She moved her mouth without sound. No. Then she pinned her expression into something blank and loose, the face of someone who had only ever seen water and soap. Later, when the mangles stilled and the room exhaled, she managed a breath near my ear as we stacked the last pile. "Stay invisible on Thursdays." "Why Thursdays?" I asked, barely shaping the words. Her eyes flicked to the ceiling as if the stone had ears. "Just be small," she said, "and don't look anyone in the face after evening prayer." That night, I listened harder and learned the building had 2 kinds of quiet. The ordinary kind that lay down with you, and the other kind that stood in the hall and watched. Thursday brought the second kind. The morning bell sounded the same. The work sounded the same. But the air felt notched, like a record with a scratch you brace for. We didn't talk about it at dinner. We couldn't. But the seating roster changed in ways that didn't fit the usual tick marks. A name would be there at morning, missing by night. No small cross to show illness. No note. You learned absence like you learn a language, by repetition until it becomes fluency you never asked for. In sewing, Sister Margaret showed me how to blind stitch a hem with motion so small the thread barely showed. Her hands were quick and gentle. Sometimes her thumb brushed the back of my knuckles in a way that felt like apology for things she couldn't name. Once, when the room was almost empty, and the hallway footsteps went the other direction, I tried a sentence. "Why is Thursday different?" She tied off her thread and bit the end, eyes on her work. "Finish the sleeve first," she said. Then very low, "Keep your voice for when it's safe. In laundry the next morning." The locked bin overflowed with special wash. Sister Agnes herself carried in a bundle and set it on the table as if she were delivering a lecture in a language we were expected to understand. The bundle left a dark bloom on the wood. She didn't look at it. She looked at us. "Work is prayer," she said. "Do it without complaint." My blisters reopened that day and bled into the rinse. I wrapped them in a strip of muslin and kept turning the handle because the sheets wouldn't pass themselves. When the bell rang twice in the late afternoon, 2 quick strikes, too close together, every girl in the room flinched and then pretended she hadn't. The sound went through the walls and took heat with it. After evening prayer, we filed out in rows. The roster had been moved again, as if God had revised his seating chart. I scanned for a freckled name and found it where it belonged. Relief stung my throat in a way I couldn't swallow down. Evelyn brushed my sleeve with hers as we passed the bulletin board. "Whatever you do," she breathed, just enough for me to feel the word, "Don't be noticed today." "Why?" Her mouth didn't move. Her eyes did. Down the hall, toward the east wing, where a door stayed locked, and the air remembered things it wouldn't say. She shook her head once. They called it special instruction. They told us laughter was for feast days. Even then, it was supposed to be the soft kind that fit between hymns. So when a man's laugh cracked the refectory like a dropped tray, bright, booming, sure of its welcome, every spoon paused mid-air. Heads did not turn. They only stilled, like birds deciding whether the shadow overhead was a cloud or a hawk. He arrived with dustless shoes and a car that didn't belong on our road. Sister Agnes took his hat herself. Mother Superior led him to the head table and poured his water as if it were a sacrament. The rule of silence, which stitched our meals tight, loosened for him as easily as a ribbon. He spoke names. He traded stories with the seniors. He laughed again, and the room worked very hard not to flinch. We kept eating. Thin soup, a heel of bread, listening to what we were not allowed to hear. Words floated, diocese, review, guidance, formation. He had the manner of a man who expected doors to open before he reached them, and was mildly amused when they did. After the bell, we filed to chapel. He mounted the little step to the lectern and looked down the central aisle as if he were measuring us for something. "Obedience," he began, voice rich enough to polish the stone, "is the highest freedom, freedom from the self that stumbles. To bend your will to the higher order is to be made straight." He let the words settle like dust, then continued. "Humility is not smallness. Humility is fittingness, fitting where God places you." His gaze moved row by row. It didn't rest long, but when it did, it lingered a fraction past comfort, on the younger girls, the ones who still looked like they believed the world could be reasoned with. When those eyes reached me, I counted 3 breaths and looked at the knot of wood in the pew ahead until the knot became a map I could fall into. After prayers, Sister Margaret touched my sleeve. "Mother Superior would like to see you," she murmured. Her kindness made the corridor feel longer. In the office, Mother Superior sat very straight. The visitor took the side chair, one leg folded neatly over the other, fingertips together as if framing a decision he'd already made. "Marianne," he said, trying my name on like a borrowed coat. "I'm reviewing the progress of our girls. Your file suggests a quick mind." His smile was generous and exact. "Quick minds need guidance lest they become cleverness, which is pride." He glanced at Mother Superior, who nodded as though he'd recited a line they both liked. "You will join a special instruction group," he said. "Thursday evenings. Fewer distractions. More formation." He said formation the way a sculptor might say marble. My mouth formed the word yes before my sense did. Mother Superior's eyes cut to me like a rule. "Gratitude is the proper response," she said. "Thank you," I heard myself say. And the part of me that still spoke plain English watched the words leave and wondered who they belonged to. In the corridor, the air felt used. Sister Margaret walked me halfway to the dormitory and then stopped to straighten a picture frame that didn't need straightening. "Keep to your routines," she said, too casually. "Drink water. Rest when allowed." She didn't meet my eyes. Her hand, at her side, opened and closed once like someone practicing letting go. Evelyn was waiting in laundry with the morning's rumor already settled in her shoulders. "He asked for you?" she said without asking. I nodded. Her freckled face went flat in the practiced way that meant she was hiding a storm. "Then Thursday you are not here," she said. "You are sick. You are invisible. Be anything but available." "How?" I whispered. "They don't let illness in unless it forces its way." "Then force it," said a voice behind us, small, steady. A girl I'd only seen through the kitchen doorway, wrists thin as pipe cleaners, eyes like dark pins that saw more than they said. She wiped her hands on her apron and did not smile. "I'm Rosa," she added, as if names were a luxury we might afford if we were quick. "I work in the kitchen." Evelyn's look flicked between us, warning, permission, prayer. She lifted a sheet to the mangle to make cover for words. Rosa stepped closer, keeping her voice low enough to be mistaken for steam. "Tomorrow is fish stew," she said. "If you need a night in the infirmary, I can make sure the stew helps you get there." "Won't they notice?" I asked. My throat had become sand, my ribs a little cage for a small panicked bird. "They'll call it carelessness and scold me for an hour," she said, as if she had already measured the price. "Then they'll put you in a clean bed behind a curtain where no one calls your name for instruction. For one night." Her eyes were older than her face. "Sometimes one night is enough." I thought of the sermon about being made straight, of the word formation, of the way Mother Superior's pen made girls into entries, and entries into duties. I thought of Thursday, a day now marked in a color the schedule didn't show. "What do I have to do?" I asked. Rosa glanced toward the door, toward the corridor that sloped to the kitchens, toward a future she kept folded small in her pocket like a scrap of recipe no one was supposed to know. "Eat the fish stew," she said. "All of it." Her hand brushed mine, a spark of conspiracy, of human heat in a room that smelled of soap and surrender. Then she was gone, swallowed by the rule of the day, leaving behind a plan so simple it scared me more than any locked door. Thursday comes. I must be sick or I won't come back the same. Rosa kept her promise. By evening the stew arrived pale and thin, gray fish riding a tide of overcooked potatoes. I ate every spoonful while my stomach clenched like a fist. Halfway through devotionals, a cold sweat started at the back of my neck. The chapel swam a little. I made it to the corridor before the cramping folded me in half. A sister found me at the washroom sink, face white as the tile. "Infirmary," she said, pinching her lips like the word tasted of blame. The infirmary lived in a small, Quiet room near the east corridor. The only place in the building that smelled of alcohol swabs instead of beeswax. 4 iron beds with white curtains. A cabinet with brown bottles. A clock that ticked too loudly, as if keeping score. The nurse, older, brisk, not unkind, took my temperature and pressed 2 fingers to my wrist. Food poisoning, she decided, writing quickly in a narrow notebook. Fluids. Isolation for the night. When she turned the book toward me to copy my name, I saw the page before mine. A thin list of entries, each line a girl reduced to symptoms. Names had been struck through with thick pencil. Privacy, they would say. All that remained were initials, times, and short notes. Headache, rest, ankle, wrap, fever, monitor, agitation, chapel quiet. Later, I would keep a careful copy on a small card for the camera, the way people keep train tickets from the first time they leave home. For now, I held onto the bed frame until the world steadied. She tucked a note into the log for me. Food poisoning? Keep overnight. The question mark felt honest in a place that didn't like questions. Behind the curtain to my left, someone turned. The movement was small but careful, like a person avoiding sore places. I caught a glimpse, a wrist wrapped in gauze, a cheek shadowed purple-yellow under the eye. She stared at the ceiling as if it were the only thing that wouldn't look back. When the nurse stepped into her little office to sort bottles, I cleared my throat. I'm Mary Ann, I whispered. The rule of silence didn't reach behind curtains. Or maybe it did, and I chose to forget. Are you all right? For a long time she didn't answer. The clock ticked, and the building made old building sounds, settling and sighing. Then, so quietly I almost missed it. I tried to run. She turned her head. Not enough to make it hurt, just enough for me to see she was younger than me. 16 at most. I made it to the outer path, she said, eyes back on the ceiling. They caught me by the tool shed. Who? Her mouth tightened. Don't ask, she whispered. They say it's for our souls. It isn't. She swallowed carefully. They put me in the cellar. The word scratched something awake inside me. There's a cellar? I had learned to map corridors with my feet, counting turns and doors. No stairs had announced themselves. Under the east wing, she breathed. Locked, cold. She closed her eyes for a moment. They keep girls there when they break rules, or when... Thursdays. Her fingers gathered the blanket in a small, tight bunch. I wanted to reach across and smooth the fabric, to press a promise into it like a mother's hand. But the space between our beds felt stiff with rules and fear. What's your name? I asked instead. She hesitated, then gave me the only thing the place hadn't taken yet. Jane, I repeated it in my head. Jane, 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 like a prayer. I would not let the walls unname her. The nurse returned with a metal cup and pressed it into my hands. Drink, she said. Small sips. She checked Jane's bandage with practiced care, her face unreadable. When she moved away again, I let the cup rest against my lower lip and looked at the logbook on the stand. The newest line held my initials, the time, and the note the nurse had written. Names above had been reduced to first letters. But under the notes column, in a different hand, a few words stood out. Transfer, E, rest, J, a letter for a person, a direction for a life. I kept my eyes open long after the lamps were dimmed. The infirmary settled into the soft, uncertain quiet of places where pain is waiting to see if it will pass. Somewhere in the building a door clicked, far away and final. I counted my breaths until they were even. Jane, I whispered toward the ceiling, because fear travels upward. Yes. How did you know about the cellar? Because I was there. Her voice thinned. Under the chapel, the hall turns. There's a door with iron bands. Keys on a ring. She paused. Sometimes a younger sister brings food. She looks... Sorry. Sister Margaret, I said before I could stop myself, then bit my lip. Names were dangerous currency here. "She's different," Jane whispered. But difference doesn't open locks. The clock counted out another minute of our lives. Somewhere, wind pushed at a shutter and the metal complained. I felt the cramp ease by degrees, replaced by a sharper feeling I hadn't had since the bus window. Resolve, like a wire pulled taut. When the nurse checked us once more before she slept in her chair, I nodded dutifully and took another sip. She left a second note in the log and drew a line under our day. Observed till morning. The pencil left a small tail like a promise that might be continued. I lay awake and mapped the east wing in my head. The turns, the locked door, the way the air cooled near the chapel. A place beneath us, hidden on purpose. If the building had a shadow, it lived there. At dawn, the bell rang the first time, ordinary and clean. The nurse opened the curtains and said I could return to the dormitory after breakfast if I kept food down. As she spoke, she slid the logbook into the drawer and the notebook vanished with a practiced motion. Records had a way of hiding in this place. On my way out, while she fetched a fresh cloth, I pressed my palm to the drawer face, then to the smooth cool of the doorknob. Metal. Lock. Key. I found Rosa in the corridor carrying a basket of towels, eyes quick, mouth set. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. She tilted her chin the smallest fraction toward the east wing. Later. If there's a cellar, there's a door. Doors can open. We didn't become a team all at once. It happened in small permissions. Glances that held, shoulders that didn't flinch. Words the size of pins passed between chores. By the end of that week, the names were stitched together. Me, Rosa from the kitchen, Evelyn from laundry, Catherine from sewing with a needle you couldn't see until it bit, Teresa from floors with a mop that moved like a metronome, and, if courage could be convinced to contradict habit, Sister Margaret. We met where sound already lived, the pump room off the garden, the laundry when the mangle squealed, the pantry when pots slapped down. Noise makes a good curtain. Rosa brought the bones of a plan first. "Deliveries," she said, rolling a folded slip of paper between her fingers. "Every other Tuesday after midday prayer. Flour, oil, soap, candles. They check the crates against a receipt. Sister Agnes signs." She flattened the paper so we could read the columns. Items, counts, a scrawled signature that dragged its way across the bottom. "My cousin drives one of the trucks. He pays attention." Evelyn added the second piece. "Keys," she said, eyes on the mangle like it might tattle. "Mother Superior keeps the master ring in her desk, the side drawer with the short handle. She removes the ring for evening rounds in chapel, then locks it back. On Tuesdays, she leaves after dinner for the diocese." Evelyn's mouth thinned. "That's the seam." Catherine was the one who put chalk to stone. In the washroom, she used a stub no longer than her finger to sketch a hand-drawn map on the underside of the windowsill, a place only a person washing would notice. Hallways. Turns. The east wing with a square around a small black rectangle. Door. The chapel. The garden wall. Little arrows for the way air moved cooler or warmer, a language we'd learned with our skin. I copied it onto a scrap of rag later, inked with laundry bluing and a pin. Teresa, who could make a bucket sound like rain or like footsteps, listened more than she spoke. When she did, it was useful. "Kitchen keeps a second kettle," she said. "If it boils over at the right moment, the sisters scatter. We can set the timing with the oven, 15 minutes from lighting to smoke. It took days to weave the threads so they wouldn't show. We matched our chores to slots on the duty chart like smugglers threading a needle in a church. Rosa eased the delivery schedule our way. Next Tuesday. I can get 3 minutes without Sister Agnes if someone cries sick in the garden. Loud. Evelyn volunteered her voice. Teresa measured distances in steps and counted them under her breath until she knew how long a corridor could be. Catherine practiced lifting a latch with her smallest finger so it wouldn't click. Sister Margaret was the last piece, and the risk. We tested her with kindness, then with a question that could be forgiven if she failed us. "The cellar," I said one afternoon as we stacked finished hems. "Does it have a second lock?" Her needle paused above the cloth, the tiniest shadow settling in her eyes. "It has 3, she whispered. "But the hinges complain." She tied off the stitch like she was making a promise. "Will you help us?" Rosa asked her in the pantry, where the air smelled of pepper and 100 whole summers, and the door could be closed without excuse. "Not for mischief," she added. "For rescue." Sister Margaret's hands were steady, but the tendons in her throat jumped. "Mother Superior keeps the keys in the top left drawer," she said. A narrow brass key for the office. The ring is inside. Iron for the cellar. Nickel for the tool shed. 2 small brass for storage and chapel side door. She leaves at 7 on diocesan nights. She returns by 10. She raised her eyes to us, something in them unbuttoning. "If I can get into the office at 8, I can pass the ring to the east corridor. But if I'm caught..." Her voice failed for a heartbeat and came back with its habit attached. "If I'm caught, it will be worse for the girls I didn't help." We all understood there are decisions that tilt a life. She made hers without a ceremony. "Tuesday," she said. "After evening prayer. 10 minutes after the bell." The scaffolding settled into place. Diversion. Catherine and Teresa in the kitchen at exactly 8. Kettle and smoke. A clatter loud enough to summon hands. Keys. Sister Margaret to the office. Quick in and out. A folded towel hiding metal weight. A pass-off at the east corridor alcove. Access Rosa and I to the cellar door with the ring. Evelyn posted at the corner to whistle if shoe leather hit stone. Rescue. Jane first, then any others. Maria from kitchen we were almost sure was below. Exit, chapel side door, east garden, tool shed wall. Catherine's chalk marked a crumbling section we'd all pretended not to notice. Ride. If Rosa's cousin could be convinced. A truck idling low beyond the wall. If not the arroyo. To the old service road and then the small town. Laundromat Rosa spoke of like a myth with fluorescent lights, we rehearsed. In our heads because bodies couldn't. We timed prayers to learn how long a reading lasted. How many stanzas of a hymn it took to reach the door. How many steps from the dormitory to the east wing if you walked like you belonged. On paper, my paper, the scrap I'd someday hold to the camera, the map looked like a child's drawing of a house. Boxes for rooms, lines for doors, a big square around the east wing as if fear needed borders. On Rosa's receipt, a pencil star bloomed beside candles, 12, and soap, 6, like a private signal. We will try. The only part of the plan that everyone said out loud, over and over, was the part that mattered most. Evelyn said it first, because she had decided to be the kind of brave that sounds like fact. "We won't leave without the cellar girls," Rosa repeated it. Catherine nodded. Teresa breathed it like a count. Sister Margaret closed her eyes and let the sentence pass through her like a prayer you don't deserve and say anyway. Tuesday slid toward us like weather. Bells would tell us when to move. Hinges would tell the walls. If the keys kissed the right locks. If the kettle hissed on cue. If the cousin's courage held at the wall, we might make a door where there had only been a rule. And if the door opened, we had to be the ones who didn't step through it alone. The corridor outside Mother Superior's office held its breath. 10 minutes after evening prayer, a kettle clanged in the kitchen. Once, twice, then a chorus of panicked voices. Teresa did her part. Catherine made the smoke. Footsteps hurried that way. Evelyn pressed herself into the shadow where the hall dog-legged, ready to whistle if the path turned unsafe. I stood in the east wing alcove, palms damp, watching the corner where Sister Margaret would appear if courage outran fear. She came fast, not quite running, habit moving like a dark sail in a sudden wind. A folded towel lay over her forearms. As she passed me, the towel dipped, weighty for cloth. Metal kissed my wrists. a ring of keys heavy as a verdict. "God go with you," she whispered, voice thinned by what it meant. Rosa and I slipped toward the door under the stairwell, a stout slab of wood banded in iron, exactly where the map had promised. The air shifted cooler. The stone sweated. Up close, I could see gouges in the lintel where keys had missed the hole over and over across years. The building itself remembering every attempt. I counted the teeth, found the iron one Evelyn had described, and fit it to the lock. It balked, then yielded with a low complaint. The sound was too loud. Everything was too loud. We eased the door open just wide enough to slide through and pulled it gently until the latch caught. The dark swallowed the last of the corridor light. "Light?" I breathed. Rosa pressed a small candle into my palm, the kind the sisters used for vigils, a thin white rib meant for long prayers, and struck a match. The flame made a faint noise like paper learning to breathe. It showed a stairway dropping steeply, stone steps worn into shallow bowls by feet that had not climbed them willingly. The damp did not feel like water. It felt like time. We descended with one hand on the wall and one protecting the flame. The air smelled of cold and old soap and something iron underneath. At the bottom, the stairs fed a narrow hall that forked left and right, and then again, a small labyrinth cut into the underbelly of obedience. "Names," Rosa said softly. "We call names. Jane?" I whispered into the seam where shadow met stone. "Maria?" Silence has a shape. This one grew a spine and listened back. "Jane?" I tried again, closer to the first door, a little square with a barred slit and no handle on the inside. The candle's light met eyes on the other side of darkness. "Marianne?" The voice was hoarse, unbelieving. It's me," I said, my throat closing around the word. "We're getting you out." Rosa fit a smaller brass key to the cell door after 3 tries, and a prayer you could hear in the way her breath caught. The bolt slid back, the door edged inward, and Jane stumbled into my arms, lighter than fear should make a person. Up close, the bruises on her cheek had gone from purple to yellow, a storm moving away. "Maria?" Rosa called down the hall. "Here," came a thin answer. 2 doors down. Rosa worked the key again. The lock stuck, then relented with a sound like a sob. Maria stepped out, eyes wide, a healing cut bisecting one eyebrow. Her hand found Jane's without instruction. They were already a pair. We kept the candle low and moved quickly, checking 2 more cells that were mercifully empty, relief so sharp it stung. Beyond them lay a room with shelves of old chairs and boxes of hymnals that smelled of mouse and mildew, proof that not everything hidden was a person. But farther along, the passage bent and narrowed, and a draft breathed from above, the building's lungs working somewhere we couldn't yet see. "Back," Rosa said, turning us toward the stair. "We can't risk more. The keys go back, and the kitchen smoke won't last." On the first step up, a sound froze us where we stood. Shoe leather across stone, not ours. Voices. Men's voices. The words were indistinct, but the cadence was the kind that brings other people's names with it. One voice we knew. A rich baritone that made sermons feel like a shape pressed against your back. The other carried authority without volume. The way Mother Superior could quiet a room by lifting her gaze. Rosa pinched the candle out, leaving the wick a wounded thread. Darkness took us whole. We flattened against cold stone and held our breath until our ribs protested. Footsteps thudded above, then receded, then came back. Keys jangled faintly. Somewhere up there a lock turned. The bell rang. Once. Then again, too close. 2 bright strikes that made the mortar remember every Thursday that had come before. The sound traveled through the bones of the place and into ours. Jane's fingers tightened around Maria's. In the dark, I found Rosa's sleeve and gripped it the way a person grabs a railing when a bridge sways. "We can't go up that way." Rosa breathed into my hair. "Garden corridor will be watched. Chapel side door, I said. In my head, Catherine's chalk map unfolded like a prayer cloth. If Sister Margaret meets us at the base of the nave, we can cut across the transept and out. Rosa hesitated a half-second, calculating corridors against courage. Yes, she said. Stay low. When I touch your arm, stop. We climbed in a silence that felt like treason. At the top, the iron-banded door hunched back into place, a darker rectangle in the hallway's thin moonlight. Rosa fit the key, turned, and eased it open a hand's width. The corridor beyond was empty but not safe. The air had that second kind of quiet, the one that watches. Evelyn slid out of an alcove and met us with a face that had scrubbed itself of expression and left only function. Kitchen confusion held, she whispered. 2 sisters to the smoke, 1 to the bell. I saw the men head toward the east garden. Her eyes cut to Jane and Maria. Relief flickered and moved on. We go now. We moved as a small animal, 4 bodies, then 5, 6, stitching ourselves to the wall's seam. Past the bulletin board where the seating roster sat dainty and useless. Past the office door that had become a hinge for the night. At the chapel transept, a shadow unbuttoned itself from the column. Sister Margaret. She pressed a finger to her lips, then the cool circle of a small brass key into my palm. Side door, she mouthed. Her eyes shone hot in the half-light. Fear or a kind of ferocity that looks like it. We stepped into the nave. A blue hush poured from stained glass onto stone. Candles were dark. The moon did the lighting. Every footfall sounded like a choice. Halfway to the side aisle, the main doors swung wide. A rectangle of corridor light cut across the nave, and a figure filled it. A tall silhouette, shoulders squared, confidence entering before the man did. Victoria? A voice called, smooth as a hand sliding across polished wood. I heard the bell. Mother Superior's outline resolved behind him, smaller but sharpened. The light framed both of them like a painting someone had hidden behind a curtain, and then revealed at the worst possible moment. We froze. 6 breaths caught on the edge of the same blade. The side door key, a small hard promise biting my palm. Mother Superior stepped into the nave as if the stone belonged to her. The man beside her, his silhouette too comfortable in other people's rooms, paused to let her accusation arrive first. What is the meaning of this? She said, voice cutting cleanly across the pews. Back to your beds. Now. Sister Margaret moved before any of us could lie. She stepped out from the column, habit dark against the blue light, and put herself between us and the pair in the doorway. Her hand lifted, small, steady. No, she said so softly it made the word bigger. These girls are leaving. The man's laugh came low, like a drawer closing. Sister, you mistake your place. My place is with them, she answered, and the tremor in her throat did not reach her eyes. This isn't rebellion. It's rescue. Mother Superior's mouth flattened until it nearly disappeared. Margaret, she said, each syllable shaped like a warning. Think. I have, Sister Margaret said. For months. She angled her shoulder so her body made a narrow shield. You can ring every bell in this house. You can wake every sister. You can call every name in your ledger. They are still leaving. The man took a step, smile thinning. You'll regret this. I regret what I haven't stopped, she said, and with a suddenness that made the moment tip, she reached back and closed her fingers around my wrist. The small brass key she'd pressed into my palm earlier dug into my skin. Hard proof of a choice already made. Side door, she breathed. And then, louder, to the doorway. Victoria, you will not touch them. Mother Superior's eyes snapped from Margaret to us. Calculation flashed like flint. Sisters, she called, turning her head toward the corridor. To the chapel. We ran. The side aisle swallowed us in shadow. I fumbled the key at the small door cut into the transept wall. hands shaking hard enough to knock metal against metal. Rosa pressed her palm over mine. "Steady," she said, and the lock answered like a held breath finally exhaled. The door opened onto night and sage. Cold air slapped our faces clean. "East garden," Evelyn whispered, already moving. We kept low along the cloister, skirts catching on lavender stems that scraped like whispering hands. Behind us, the bell began to peal, again and again, frantic now. Lights flared in windows. Footfalls scattered like spilled beads on tile. Jane stumbled on the first step down. Maria caught her under the elbow without breaking stride. Teresa took the rear, counting our bodies in her head the way she counted rows of floorboards when she mopped. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sister Margaret's voice chased us from the chapel. Not words now, but the resistant thud of a struggle. A chair leg dragging, a warning cry. I didn't let the picture form. There wasn't time. The east garden opened like a dark mouth. The tool shed crouched near the far wall, roof sagging, the smell of oil and old wood thick in the air. We veered for it. A floodlight snapped on behind us, bleaching the path. "Go!" Rosa hissed. Faster. The crumbling section of wall looked smaller than it did on the map. 3 feet high at most, rough edges glittering where embedded shards of glass had caught the moon. We dropped to our knees, palms to sand, scrabbling forward. Stone tore my hem and bit my skin. The wall tasted of dust and iron and something like victory refusing to be pretty. I shoved my suitcase life through first. Nothing but our bodies and our names, then wriggled after. The key clamped between my teeth so I wouldn't lose it. On the far side, a truck crouched low and patient, engine dark, a tarp stretched over the open bed like a held breath. The smell of rubber and sun-warmed canvas wrapped the night. The driver's side door cracked open. A voice a shade above a whisper. "Rosa!" A quick silhouette, young, wiry, Rosa's chin copied onto a boy's face. "Miguel," she panted, half laugh, half prayer. He swung the tailgate down in one practiced motion. "Back, now, stay low." We piled in, first Evelyn pulling Jane up by both wrists, then Maria, then Teresa and me. Cold metal shocked the skin through our thin skirts. I caught my breath on a burr in the bed and left a strip of fabric behind. Evidence later, the torn edge, the line of red on my palm where I'd grabbed a bolt. Rosa climbed into the cab. Miguel snapped the tarp down with quick hands, the ties biting the ridges along the bed's lip. "Don't move," he warned, dropping his voice to a thread. "If the canvas shifts, I can't help you." Boot steps pounded the far side of the wall. Voices called, names, commands, the crack of temper hitting authority. The truck didn't move. The truck did the most dangerous thing. It waited. Under the tarp, the air turned close and hot, and tasted like fear wrapped in dust. We lay cheek to metal ribs, shoulders pressed into strangers until strangers felt like bones you'd always known. Behind us, a gate clanged. Someone shouted for a light. Someone else shouted our number wrong and then corrected herself. Bells, plural, now, chapel and gatehouse. The sound doubled and doubled again, until it became a single ribbon of alarm laced through the night. The engine coughed to life. Not loud, not yet. Miguel kept it to a murmur, letting the truck roll backward on its own weight toward the dirt track. When the wheels found the ruts, he eased the clutch, and the truck began to move for real. Slow as a prayer you force through a narrow throat. We bumped over stones that knocked our teeth. I bit my lip and tasted copper. The tarp breathed with us, rising a little with each shared inhale, collapsing as one when we remembered to exhale together. Headlights stayed dark. The stars did the seeing. Only when the ground leveled and the night opened wider did Miguel risk a low beam and a little more speed. The truck pitched. The ties of the tarp sang through their eyelets. Jane's breath hitched next to my ear. Maria's fingers dug crescents into my sleeve. Evelyn whispered a count to keep from crying. We drove like that for long minutes measured in heartbeat math. When the road became smoother and the bells were only a rumor tucked into hills, Miguel tapped the cab roof twice with his fist. "You can breathe now," he called, voice rough with restraint. We didn't throw the tarp back. We slipped out from under it like creatures too long in a cave, blinking into moonlight behind a row of squat buildings on the edge of a town that might not even have a name on a map. Rosa turned in the passenger seat, eyes searching all of us. She smiled with her whole face for the first time I'd seen. "You did it," she said, as if we were the ones who'd built the road. I looked down at my hands. Scraped palms, dirt in the half-moons of my nails. A long tear in my hem stitched a new shape into the skirt. I touched the brass key in my pocket and felt it cool against my thigh. The only beautiful thing we had stolen. We were free of the walls. But freedom isn't safe. The bell could travel farther than we could. Stories outrun people. If we meant to keep this, if we meant for Jane and Maria and the ones still under stone to matter, we needed more than distance. We needed to be believed. "Where now?" Evelyn asked, voice ragged. "To someone who will listen," I said, the picture of a newsroom table and a notebook flaring bright as a flare in the night. "Because running is only the start. Tomorrow we have to make the world hear us." The laundromat's back room smelled like soap and warm lint, clean in a way the convent never was. Elena, the owner, had a small apartment tucked behind the rows of machines. She moved like someone used to fixing things with what she had. "Bathroom's down the hall," she said, handing out towels that felt like clouds to skin that had only known burlap. "Hot water's tricky, but it's yours." The first shower was a shock. Heat found places on my back I didn't know were tight and pried them open. Dirt I'd forgotten to feel lifted in gray threads and ran from me. I stood under the spray and cried so quietly even I almost didn't hear it. When I came out in a borrowed dress and socks that didn't have numbers stitched inside, Elena pressed a mug into my hands. Real coffee, dark and strong. Not the bitter water they allowed on feast days. The first sip made my knees go a little soft. We slept on blankets on the floor, 6 bodies in a room that didn't mind the sound of us. Freedom has its own insomnia. Every time a pipe ticked or a car door thudded on the street, someone's breath hitched and then settled. We were safe for a night. The morning would ask new questions. It brought a man with a notebook and wire-rimmed glasses, a reporter Rosa's cousin had whispered to. "The way you tell a secret with both hands open so the other person can see. You don't mean harm." "David," he said, not offering to shake, just nodding like he knew hands could be tender. "If you're willing, I'd like to hear your stories." He turned his notebook so the coil wouldn't catch on the table and waited. We told him in shifts, because truth is heavy and we were tired. He didn't flinch at pauses. He didn't rush the parts where words failed and hands took over, sketching corridors in the air. When he pressed, it was for specifics, dates, times, descriptions that could be checked. He asked for paper, the bus ticket stub, a photocopied schedule, anything that could be called a fact in a room where so much of what mattered had been done in silence. "Will they print it?" Evelyn asked, voice flat like she'd already written the answer and didn't like how it read. "I don't know," he said, which made me trust him. "But if I can verify 2 things you've told me from outside sources, my editor will listen. If I can verify 5, we're not a rumor anymore." He left with pages of notes and a promise to return. He did, 2 days later, with a look that belonged to someone who had stuck his hand into a machine and felt the gears. "There are whispers outside your walls," he said. "Old complaints." He made a list of names we'd given him and drew lines where stories touched. Then he slid a folded sheet across the table to me. "If we publish, we'll have to use language that keeps us out of court." The article ran a week later, not on the front page but in the center column of page 3, elbowed by a council vote and a photograph of a high school basketball team. The headline wore a cautious suit. "Former residents allege abuse at religious institution." Under it, the words we'd spoken returned to us in smaller, safer shapes. Allege, claim, could not be independently verified. Names were withheld, Initials stood where faces should be. Dates were tight as a fist. I held the clipping to the camera light that night, my thumb covering the town, my other hand shaking only a little. "It's there," I said. "Not enough. But there." Life split after that, because safety demanded it. Jane went with Rosa to an aunt who believed more in girls than in callers. Maria headed to Colorado, where Elena knew a woman with rooms and locks that opened from the inside. Evelyn had a sister in Arizona who didn't ask questions, just set another plate. Teresa found space in a church shelter that held the line for people the world forgot. Letters became our lifeline. Thin paper traveling long distances, folded twice, ink steady where our hands were not. We kept score of small victories. A job washing dishes where the boss didn't shout. A night without waking from a bell that wasn't ringing. A new pair of shoes paid for in cash that belonged to us. David kept coming back. Each time his questions narrowed and his list grew. He wasn't alone for long. When the first piece ran, others called. Regional papers, then bigger ones. Not all were kind. Some wanted tears more than facts. We learned to say no, and I'm not ready, and ask me about the schedule board instead of the bruises. We learned to anchor our stories with what could be shown. The posted timetable, the confiscation ledger, the duty chart with the tin markers. We drew the corridor map again and again until the ink felt like a door. Every time I feared we were shouting into a well, Rosa would show me the growing list on the back of an envelope. Women writing in, girls just out, women much older than me now, who had learned to fold their past into a drawer and were unfolding it, just a little. 8 letters in the first month, 17 by the second. By spring, 23 sworn statements had arrived at a small office with a peel and stick nameplate. The office belonged to Catherine Salazar, a civil attorney who wore her hair pulled back like a blade and kept a candy jar on her desk like a dare. "This will not be quick," she said, flipping through our affidavits with a pen held like a scalpel. "It will not be clean. They will say you are confused, vindictive, mistaken. They will ask what you wore. They will ask why you waited. Answer only to what you know. Let your numbers speak." Numbers made a strange comfort. 6 of us who ran that night. 23 who wrote within months. 41 by the time Catherine filed the first papers. Names distilled to initials on a sheet I keep to this day. A column of letters that stand for women whose miles and years I don't know, but whose silences sounded just like mine. I showed the camera an anonymized count, the way a survivor shows proof without showing skin. The diocese issued a statement with edges so polished you could see yourself in them if you wanted to. "We take these allegations seriously. We will cooperate fully. We remain committed to the care of those entrusted to us." It read like a door that opened on paper and nowhere else. Then, one afternoon, David called Elena's laundromat and asked me to meet him at the diner on the corner. He slid today's paper across the table and tapped a short paragraph beneath the fold. "Institution to shut temporarily for administrative review." It was one of those phrases that sounds like a room with the lights off and the curtains drawn. Relief and anger hit me like 2 waves from different directions. "It's something," David said, reading my face. "But it's not the word." "What word?" "Wrong." I folded the clipping until the headline sat small enough to fit in my pocket. "They can close a door and call it review," I said. "But until someone with a collar says the word out loud, the world will treat this like bad weather instead of what it is." That night I wrote letters until my hand cramped. Evelyn in Arizona, Rosa in Albuquerque, Teresa in Denver, Maria back in Texas with her family, Jane still waking at 3 a.m. when the city is at its gentlest. "The building is dark," I wrote. "The papers say temporarily. Catherine says keep going. David says more women are calling. I say I am tired, and I am not done." We slept in the laundromat's back room one more time before scattering again, the machines humming our lullaby. In the morning, Elena handed me a small envelope with bus fare and a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. "Go where you can be loud," she said. We did. We spread to corners of the map that didn't know us and learned new streets by the way the light fell. We kept writing. We kept naming. We kept anchoring our voices to paper that could be held up in rooms where people preferred anecdotes to evidence. The institution shuttered for review. The bell was quiet. But paper doors can open and close without letting anyone in. Would anyone with the power to make it stick say the one word that mattered? Wrong. They closed the place with a phrase that sounded like a locked file drawer. For administrative review. And then they moved people like furniture. The visiting cleric disappeared to another parish 2 states away. Mother Superior was sent to a retreat. A statement arrived on thin paper with thick language. We take allegations seriously. We commit to reflection and reform. Reflection doesn't fix bruises, but it kept the gates shut. No bell. No Thursday. Years passed, the way years always do when you're busy learning to be a person outside of other people's rules. One small brave thing after another. I took the bus north and lived on the far edge of a city that breathed through steam grates. I worked in a diner where the morning rush taught me to move fast without spilling. I studied at night until numbers and verbs stopped snarling at me. The day the envelope came with my GED diploma, I smoothed it flat on the kitchen table and cried the kind of tears that don't ask permission. "One more door," I wrote to the girls, opening from the inside. I became the thing I'd drawn in a little notebook back when hope had smaller bones, a teacher. Not at the elementary school I once imagined, but at a city high school where the desks were carved with the names of kids who'd already had to be tougher than most adults. On my first day, I wore a blouse that made me feel like I was inhabiting my own name, and clipped an ID badge to the pocket. My photo, the school crest, the word staff in letters that meant I belong here. In the quiet before first period, I set a piece of chalk on the ledge and said out loud to an empty room, "Your voice matters. Your truth matters." It wasn't a lesson plan yet. It was a promise to the girl I used to be. We stayed a network even as distance frayed some edges. Letters held us when geography couldn't. Rosa wrote first, from a tiny apartment off Central Avenue, about a job at a legal office and classes at night. Evelyn sent a photo of a dry backyard in Arizona and a note. "I plant things now. They live." Teresa mailed a postcard of mountains so blue they hurt, and said she'd learned the names of every wildflower on her walk to the clinic. Maria confessed she still woke at the double bell hour some nights, but had started singing again in a church that listened. Jane took longer to write. Her letter was short and brave. "I'm helping at a shelter. We keep the lights on bright. Every so often, an envelope in neat, precise handwriting found me with no return address. Margaret now, not sister, teaching in a public school with posters on the wall and a window that opened. Inside a page or two, I left. I am learning how to be useful without obedience being the point. I keep chalk in my pocket. I say your name in my head when I make a hard call. I keep one of those folded letters in the same box as my diploma and my first staff badge. Paper remembers what we ask it to. The legal case moved like winter. Slow, relentless, invisible work underneath. Our attorney stacked affidavits until the pile had its own gravity. The diocese countered with polite denials and motion after motion shaped like detours. Newspapers, bigger ones now, printed updates with words that learned to be less careful over time. 3 years after we ran, a settlement came. Not a fortune, not the kind of justice you frame, but acknowledgement in black and white. The convent remained closed. Records were preserved, not buried. Procedures were strengthened. And somewhere in a quiet room, a person who had never met us signed a page that said, in ways the public couldn't quite hear, we were right to run. Healing didn't arrive in a parade. It came like ordinary weather. Small, warm fronts, a clearing sky, a gust that still knocked me sideways some nights. It looked like friendships that didn't ask me to be smaller. It looked like a teenager in my third period class staying after the bell to say, "Ms., can I tell you something?" And me answering, "Yes, you can." It looked like learning to rest without apology, to pray without fear. to love without bargaining away my voice first. If I could bottle one sentence for the girls I teach and the woman I am, I'd make it this: your voice matters. Your truth matters. Whispered or shouted, written or spoken in a courtroom or a kitchen, say it. Keep saying it. Doors listen eventually. For the record, for the camera, for anyone who needs proof, here is my small evidence montage. The diploma with my name spelled right. The worn staff ID from my first year. Edges frayed from nervous thumbs. The letter signed Margaret that I unfold when I start to doubt good choices can survive their consequences. They are only paper, but paper changed my life twice, once when it tried to send me away, and once when it helped bring me home to myself. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you. I know what it costs to listen to hard things. Before I turn off the camera, I want to ask you something I've asked myself 1,000 times about that night in the chapel. If you'd have stood with us at that chapel door, what would you have done? And why? Tell me below. And if this helped you feel less alone, pass it to someone who needs to hear that their voice, yes, theirs, matters. If this story matters to you, please subscribe. Your support helps this reach someone who needs it.